Picture a door you stopped opening years ago. Behind it, something you once poured everything into, a relationship, a career, a version of yourself you were certain was the real one. You know the door leads nowhere good, and yet every time you pass it, your hand moves toward the handle. This is not a story about bad decisions. It is a story about why we protect them, why we keep watering a plant we already know is dead, why we sit through a movie we hate rather than walk out, why we stay in a city, a job, a marriage, long after the part of us that knows the truth has gone quiet and started waiting. Psychologists have a name for the mechanism, the sunk cost fallacy. But that name is almost too clean, too rational, to capture what it actually feels like from the inside. From the inside, it does not feel like a fallacy at all. It feels like loyalty. It feels like faith. It feels sometimes like the only coherent thing you can do. In 1985, two researchers, Hal Arkers and Catherine Bloomer, published a series of experiments that quietly changed how psychologists think about human judgment. In one of them, participants who had already spent money on a ski trip were far more likely to commit to it, even when a better trip to a more appealing resort became available at the same time. They did not choose what they wanted. They chose what they had already paid for. The money was gone either way. It could not be recovered by going, but going felt like honoring it. Arkes and Bloomer called this the sunk cost effect, the tendency to continue an endeavor because of previously invested resources. Time, money, effort, even when discontinuing, would clearly lead to a better outcome. The rational move, the one every economist will tell you to make, is to treat past costs as gone and ask only one question: what is the best choice from this moment forward? But that is not what people do, and understanding why is the whole puzzle. Part of the answer lives in the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who spent decades mapping the ways human beings are not the rational calculators economics assumed we were. One of their most durable findings is this: losses feel roughly twice as powerful as equivalent gains. The pain of losing $20 is not the same as the pleasure of finding $20. They are not even close. This asymmetry is not a quirk. It is wired into how we process the world. So when you have already invested 3 years into something, walking away is not experienced as freeing up 3 years. It is experienced as losing 3 years. And the mind, in its hunger to avoid that loss, does something quietly devastating. It frames continuing not as a choice, but as the only way to make the past mean something. There is an old story about the Concorde jet. Britain and France poured enormous public funds into developing it through the 1960s and into the 1970s, long after private projections made clear that it would never be commercially viable. Engineers knew, economists knew, but the governments kept funding, kept building, kept flying, in part because stopping would have meant admitting that everything already spent had produced nothing. So they spent more. Aviation researchers who studied the pattern eventually gave it a name: the Concorde fallacy, a billion-dollar monument to the human refusal to let go. But this is not really about jets. Think of the person who has spent a decade in a career that no longer fits, who keeps going because leaving would mean those 10 years were wasted, or the entrepreneur who keeps funding a startup that the market has already quietly rejected, because to close it would be to close the version of themselves who believed in it. Or imagine someone, not a cautionary tale, just a person, sitting at a kitchen table on an ordinary Wednesday evening, staring at a relationship that stopped working a long time ago. She knows. She has known for longer than she would admit. But there is a photo on the refrigerator from a holiday 4 years back, when everything still made sense, and she cannot reconcile the woman in that photo with the woman who would walk out the door. To leave feels like betraying her. This is where the psychology becomes something more than a logical error. Because what we are really protecting when we protect a sunk cost is not the investment. It is the self that made it. The choice was not just a choice, it was a statement about who you were, what you valued, what you believed in. And abandoning it feels like abandoning that person. It feels like saying, the one who chose this was wrong, and I am not sure I can live with being that person. So we do not walk away. We escalate. We invest more to prove the original investment was justified. Psychologists who study organizations call this the escalation of commitment, the pattern in which decision makers increase their investment in a failing course of action precisely because they are the ones who chose it. The more you've staked on a decision, the harder it becomes to see it clearly, and the harder you try to see it clearly, the more the loss of what you've already spent floods your vision. But here's the paradox. The very act of staying to honor the past is the thing that makes the past smaller. Every additional year spent in a career that costs you does not redeem the years already spent. It adds to the total cost. Every dollar thrown at a dead venture does not bring the earlier dollars back to life. It simply means there are more dollars that will never return. The sunk cost logic promises you a way to recover what is lost. It cannot keep that promise. It never could. Epictetus taught that the source of human suffering is almost always the same. We try to control what is not in our control, and we neglect what is. The past is not in your control. It is fixed, final, beyond negotiation. But the next choice, only the next choice, belongs entirely to you. To keep throwing your future into the past is, in his framing, a form of confusion about where you actually live. You do not live in the investment you have already made. You live in what you do from here. There is one question that can cut through the noise, not a formula, not a framework. Just a question you bring to the door you keep standing in front of. Knowing what I know now, would I choose this today? Not, was the original choice reasonable? Not, does this path have good memories attached to it? Not, would walking away mean the years were wasted? Just, if I was starting from zero, standing here with everything I now understand, would I choose this? The honest answer to that question is usually already waiting. It has been waiting for a while. Because the years were not wasted. That is the quiet truth the sunk cost trap hides from you. You learned inside them. You became someone inside them. The time shaped you, even when the outcome disappointed you. What walking away erases is not the past. It cannot touch the past. What it erases is only the story that you owe the past your future. Those are not the same thing. They only feel that way from close up. When you catch yourself staying, not because you want to, but because of what you have already given, that is the moment to ask the question again. Knowing what I know now, would I choose this today? If the answer is no, then continuing is not loyalty. It is not even hope. It is a negotiation with a version of the past that cannot negotiate back. And it is costing you something the sunk cost never did. It is costing you the future. Go back to that door, the one you stopped opening, the one your hand still moves toward. What if the door is not a monument to everything you poured into what is behind it? What if it is just a door? What is behind it belongs to a chapter that is already written. You do not have to keep reading it to prove you valued it. The chapter was real. It happened. And the next one is still blank, which means it is still yours. Walking away is not waste. It is not defeat. It is not an act of disrespect toward everything you gave. It is the only move that treats your future with the same seriousness you once gave your past. The sunk cost trap convinces you that leaving means the investment failed, but the investment was never the point. And you are still here, standing in front of a door that does not have to define what comes next.